Hello, and welcome to the first coding tutorial for SkillAPI. In this tutorial, I will be covering how to set up your workspace and creating the base classes that you'll need to get started. First off, you're going to want the actual SkillAPI jar file to code against, to reference. So to do that, you just download it as if you're going to use it. By going to the Bucket Dev page. The link will be provided below, and clicking on the download button. Now, I uploaded a version recently, so I'm going to be using that instead, but it should be available quite soon for you anyway, if not already by the time you view this. So you download SkillAPI along with the Bucket version you're building against. And then you open up a new project. I'll have one created here already. You can just create a new project yourself, name it whatever you want. Mine will be named tutorial, just because this is a tutorial. Alright, so first thing is adding your references. Now, in IntelliJ, you go to File, Project Structure, and you go to Modules. Then you click on this plus button over here. It's different in Eclipse, but if you've made plugins before, you should know how to reference things. So for this, we'll be building against the same thing as SkillAPI 1.6.2. You can build against whatever you want. Then you also need the SkillAPI that we just downloaded. Alright, once you have those references, it's time to get started. So you can make your package that you want, if you use packages. Generally, I tend to. And then your main class that you use with every plugin. Now, just like any plugin you've ever made, you can just extend Java plugin. And now this is the first introduction to SkillAPI. After you extend Java plugin, you also need to implement the skill plugin interface that's provided. Now, this interface is basically helps set up the stuff for SkillAPI, and it requires two methods. I'm just going to auto-implement these methods, but they are register skills and register classes. Register skills is for telling SkillAPI what skills you have made, and register classes is the same thing except for classes. Right now, since we don't have any skills or classes, we can just leave these blank. However, if you want to keep a reference of SkillAPI for future use, in case you need it, you can add a variable here for SkillAPI. And then in register skills, the first line you can do is set it. So then you have just a reference saved in case you need it for later on. Generally, skills and classes already have references to them, so you can just access it through there, but say if you set up a listener or something and you need access to it, it's good to keep that around. And unlike most plugins, you don't need an on-enable or on-disable unless you have your listener. So if you need a listener separate from the skills, you would need the on-enable and disable to set that up. But we're not going to be using that right now, so I won't include those because they're not needed. Alright, So once you have the base methods for that, now we can go set up a class and a skill. So what I tend to do is create a package for each of my classes. So just to keep organized and group things together by what they're used for. So in this tutorial, let's stick with the general idea and make another fighter. So make a fighter package and then create the fighter class inside of it. Now my packages are lowercase, my classes are uppercase, just to differentiate them. You can name them however you want. That's just my naming conventions. Alright, so when you have your class, it needs to extend the class custom class. This is basically SkillAPI's class for designating something as a class. Like a skill class, not like a Java class. And classes, they don't have any methods to use or implement, but you have to override it or provide something for its constructor. A good practice is first to provide the name as a constant. So in this, we're going to be naming it fighter, so I'll make a public static string. It'll be the name, and I'll set it to the name of the class, which is fighter. Now for the constructor, so we can get rid of this error, it doesn't require any parameters for yours, but then you need to call super. This is so you can pass things to the SkillAPI's constructor for classes. Now the first argument is the name of the class. So that'll just be our constant that we just made. Second is the parent class, so what it professes from. Since fighter will be one of our starting classes, we're just going to leave that as null. Because null means that it doesn't profess from anything. Next is the prefix. This is essentially the name, except it can be colored for things such as the skill tree, the prefix in chat, and the scoreboard title. So say we want to give the fighter a gold name. Just do chatColor.gold plus the name. Alright. The next thing you have to do is the level it professes at. Now, if it doesn't profess at all, like if it's your final stage in your professions, then you would put 0 to say it doesn't profess anymore. For fighter, let's say it professes at level, let's say 30. And the final one is what the maximum level you can reach as this class is. Generally this will be right around the max level, like the same or a little bit higher. It needs to be at least the profession level, otherwise you won't be able to reach it. So for this, let's just keep it the same as 30. Alright, so that's all you absolutely need as for a class. Later on we're going to be adding skills to this, which is just the method addSkills. But I'm going to leave this blank right now since we don't have any skills to add. And then we can go set up our first skill. So creating a new class, again. Let's keep things simple and just make a damaging skill that maybe knocks back the enemy a little bit. Like a single target skill. So for that, let's name it something like Slam. And now skills extend the class skill. Now again, class skill doesn't require any methods, but you need to pass things into its constructor. Just like a class, you need a name, so we're going to make that a constant at the top, a public static string. And this one is slam. Now, same thing, the constructor doesn't require any parameters for yours, but then passing into super, you need a few arguments. Now there are a couple of options with this. There's only 4 required parameters, and there's 2 more for later on skills. But for starting skills, you'd only want to worry about the first 4. The first one is the name of the skill, so just that constant we made again. The second is what type of skill it is. There is an enum provided for this, so you just select one of them. The available options are skill shot, AoE, skill shot, target, target AoE, area, attack imbuement, linear, passive, or self. Since this is going to be a target damaging one, I'm just going to leave it as target. Next is the item that this is represented by. You can enter it as either a material or an item stack. The only difference is if you do a material, you can't control the data value, but the item stack does control the data value. If you provide an item stack, the amount and the other data such as that don't matter, but only the material and the data value count, and they will be kept. This one I'm going to keep it simple and just use a material, since I don't really care about data values right now. And for slam, let's give it, let's say, a wooden sword. Alright, and the last required parameter is the max level of the skill, so how high you can raise it. For this, let's leave it at a value like 5, so you can raise it 5 times. Alright, so while this doesn't do anything, it allows you to actually add it to the game. So if we went back to our fighter class, we can just add here slam.name. Now it will be in our class. So fighter now has slam, and now we can go register it with the API. So if you go back to your tutorial plugin, go to register skills, you do SkillAPI dot add skills. Then in here you would add all of your skills. Right now we only have slam, so we do new slam. In register classes, you do the same thing except with classes. So SkillAPI.add classes. And then since we only have fighter, you just do new fighter. And once you have that, if you actually compile this and ran it with the server, you would have one class, which is a fighter, and it would have one skill, slam. Again, the skill wouldn't do anything since we haven't added any effects yet, but that's all that's needed to get things into the game. So that'll be the end of this first tutorial. Next one we'll actually start to add effects to skills, such as slam, to make things actually happen. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.